even the word university is coming from the same root than universal. So we need to have the same international global perspective, because knowledge is something that should be applicable to the entire humanity. So university is something that is connected to internationalization, that is connected to worldwide actions from the very beginning. Especially for countries in continental Europe, I think they have to rethink what is the system they are applying to international students, because in many cases they are losing thousands of international students that can be very talented and can be providing value to the local and to the national societies, but at the end they don't come to these countries because they have this kind of very big barrier of entry for them. So I think your role is very important in the third group of barriers of entry. This third group of barriers of entry is the technological, let's say technological / procedural barriers of entry, in which international students that are very motivated and maybe have the resources, they have the academic resources, and in many cases they have as well the financial resources to get involved and to enroll internationally. They cannot cross the barrier because they find, or maybe it's rather complicated to them, because they find that the information, the knowledge that is necessary in order to solve this barrier is dispersed, is not well structured, maybe it's written in other languages, is contradictory according to the sources.
Hello and welcome to another episode of EdTech and Pancakes. I'm your host, Razmik Sargassian, and my special guest today is Professor Sebastián Bruque, who is a professor at the University of Jaén, as well as the Deputy Rector of Internationalization of the university. Professor Bruque has been consulting European and international institutions in terms of internationalizing higher education. He's also the former executive secretary of the Conference of Spanish Universities, namely the section of internationalization. And Professor Bruque has also published on this topic quite extensively. I recently had the pleasure to read his article on universityworldnews.com called Spanish Internationalization Improving but Long Way to Go. I can highly recommend this article to our audience or anyone interested in international education. Professor Bruque, thank you so much for making time for this and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure talking to you, and hope this interview can be interesting for the people interested in internationalization of higher education, and for the students and staff who might be interested as well in future strategies and in reshaping strategies related to the sector.
Beautiful. Give us a little bit of a background in terms of your experience. And it seems like internationalization of education is such a big topic for you. How did you gravitate to this topic to begin with?
Well, like you mentioned before, I was the vice president of internationalization of at the University of Jaén in Spain until May 2023, until last year. I was working as well as the former executive secretary of the section of internationalization of the Spanish Association of Universities, and I was extensively participating during my 16 years of experience in the internationalization of higher education sector. Well, in several areas, I supported as well some international organizations like the European Parliament and the European Commission and the European and the Spanish National Agency for Erasmus, which well, I had the opportunity to work with them and to obtain insights and to exchange knowledge with my colleagues and with other institutions and with other international national institutions that are related with the strategy and with the overall strategy of internationalization. On top of that, I was able to participate during my career in quite a few exchanges with universities, almost everywhere in Europe and in the States, in Latin America, in Asia, in some Australasia countries as well. So I had the opportunity to talk and to learn and to participate in many international events related to the current structure and to the future trends of the internationalization of this sector, which for me is really amazing. It's really interesting, and it's going to be subject to new forces that they are going to shape the future and the present of the sector that is currently taking more and more attention from an economic, from an educational, and from a social point of view.
Excellent. You came highly recommended, so we knew you were the right person to speak to. Let's begin from general to specific, and this may be a bit of an obvious question to some, but what is the deeper meaning of international education? Why should universities seek to internationalize their process and themselves, or potentially what are some of the motivations that perhaps aren't so discussed or obvious?
Well, that's a very good question. And maybe it's not that simple to answer. Well, internationalization, I think, is a multiple factor for reshaping and renovating the structure of the universities and the structure of the higher education sector overall. So the motivations to work for internationalization are not unique. So we can find different motivations related to internationalization. Maybe one of the factors is the most important one. That is, internationalization is currently something that is needed in order to survive, in order for the higher education institution to survive, because otherwise, if they don't internationalize themselves, if they don't internationalize their curricula or the staff or the students' body, they are not able to adapt themselves to the changes they have in the society and the economy. So I think it's something as a force that is absolutely needed in order to maintain, in order for the higher education institutions, whether public or private, there is no distinction here, to be in the sector and to maintain them in the sector. So it's something that is claimed and that is requested as well for the decision makers in the public sector and for the students and the families as well in the private sector, because they think that internationalization is going to be absolutely necessary for the education of their families and education of their boys and girls that are approaching to the university as a bachelor students in the first hand, and therefore as well for students that maybe they are already professionals working for master and doctoral degrees. So first thing, internationalization is something that became obligatory or became such as a kind of needed strategy that is absolutely needed in order for the companies, in order for the universities, whether public or private, to be in the sector and to keep them in the sector. The second thing, internationalization is something that is very connected to the internationalization of the economies. So the internationalization is something that it was created maybe in the concept of the university itself from the very beginning. So we know that in the past 3,000 years, so we have had these kinds of higher education everywhere, in all around the world. Normally in the form of universities from the medieval centuries and from the medieval ages, but after that, in the case or in the form of liberal universal institutions that were approaching knowledge from a universal, international, worldwide point of view. So the comparison of international knowledge and the comparison with among sources of national and international knowledge was in the very nature of the university itself. So we have to take into consideration that even the word university is coming from the same root than universal. So we need to have the same international global perspective, because knowledge is something that should be applicable to the entire humanity. So universities is something that is connected to internationalization and that is connected to worldwide actions from the very beginning. What is true is that in the last maybe 3 decades or even 4 decades, the internationalization trends increased a lot. After the 60s, due to the internationalization of science, the decision makers at the level of the universities and the level of higher education. So they decided that even more now than ever, since science should be universal and science should be international by nature, the training maybe that was the big change. Training should be universal and should be worldwide and should be international as well. So the big leap that happened in the 70s and in the 70s of the 19th century, of the 20th century, sorry, and the 80s of the 20th century was really impressive regarding the internationalization of the internationalization of higher education and the internationalization of the universities. It was at the second time that the second force took place. The second force was the real internationalization and universalization of higher education due to the fall of the two blocs that were dominating maybe the dynamics of the economy and the dynamics of the international politics. That was, the Soviet side on one side until the end of the 80s and the liberal Western democracies on the other side. So everything was changed in the 80s and the 90s. These dynamics of liberal countries in the West against the Soviet bloc in the East fell down, and it was destroyed and replaced by a new reality, politically and economically. And this increased very much the global trends for internationalization as a kind of internationalization revolution that took place in the 80s and the 90s and in the 2000s as well. We are now in a third situation in which we are shaping new trends as well as new forces, and this new situation has two different kind of sources and two different kind of forces that are affecting the higher education situation and framework at the moment. The first one is that maybe we don't have now the two blocs, the Soviet versus the Western democratic liberal economies or nations on the West, but now we have a new force that is these restrictions to the liberal traditional liberal democratic way of understanding the world in the Western, that now is retaliated by the situation that is happening, for example, in Russia, or that is happening, for example, in China, in which there is a strong control of the government on the higher education institutions as well. But at the same time, many of them, they are still competing at the international arena. They are still competing in the international field. And they are competing not only in the field of education, but they are competing fiercely internationally in the field of the way they attract international students, they attract international students, and they produce international science. So, well, overall, we can say that again, now, and taking into account all the forces that are affecting the future, we can have now three aspects that should be taken into account to explain what is internationalization. The first thing is that the global knowledge, global science, and the global interchange of students and knowledge and staff as well is now even more important than ever. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is that we have new forces and new factors affecting the internationalization field that should be taken into consideration in order to understand what is the future and what is going to be the route that will be developed in the future for the international higher education institutions. So for me, we are now in a changing point, in a changing stage of the history of internationalization of higher education that will provide the shape of our field in the next few years, and maybe is even more exciting than ever. For me, it's comparable to the late 80s or to the beginning of the 90s, because we are approaching to a situation in which economic and political and social factors is merging with the effect of technological factors at the same time that will revolutionize the way we approach education, the university, and the concept of the university itself, and how the university will be adapted to these forces in the next few years.
Wow, thank you so much, Professor Bruque, for such a comprehensive answer. As someone who has benefited from international education, I mean, this was an important topic for you, but just to hear you speak about all these wider implications. I mean, it's huge. I want to ask you this. When I hear about internationalizing a university, the first thing that comes to mind is international applicants, international faculty, potentially the curriculum so that the students can compete internationally. But what would you consider the pillars of internationalizing university? And if a university wants to start internationalizing, would you kind of prioritize one pillar or over the other?
Yeah, that's another very interesting question as well, because it's not a simple question to be answered, and therefore we have to take into consideration several pillars or several factors working at the same time. Let's go step by step. I'm talking about the pillars at the beginning. So, in my opinion, the first pillar for internationalization is the freedom of movement, or the most important factors we have. That is basically three. The first one is the freedom of movement of the students itself. So obviously, if we don't have this kind of on-site mobility that can be, of course, an added and helped out or supported by online mobility. But if we don't have, if we don't keep this kind of international mobility for students, there is no internationalization of the education, of higher education. I think the impact of mobility of students that was increasing a lot and has been increasing has been increasing a lot during the last 30 years or even 40 years. They have to be in the same situation, or even they have to be even stronger in the future than it was in the last decades or 40 decades. Why? Because maybe we can talk about that later on, but we cannot have an internationalization of higher education if we don't keep the mobility of the most important resource and the most important raw material we have in higher education, which is the student body. So we can add other things. We can include complementary factors for online mobility, for example, that is going to affect a lot as well, and it's going to shape a lot the future of higher education. But the mobility of students is something that should be kept in the same force and with the same parameters that it was growing in the last 30 to 40 years. The second thing is the internationalization of the staff and the internationalization of knowledge. So these two things are together. Internationalization of staff and knowledge, they should be working together, because together with the internationalization and the mobility for students. So this is the most important way in order to our institutions to get new knowledge, to get new practices, to adapt to new technological factors, to adapt to new learning capabilities. And we cannot do that if we keep a kind of closed or not connected or not interconnected staff. Though, so that is going to be very important, not now in our current present moment, but in the future as well. And the third thing that is going to be, the third pillar we have to take into consideration, and we have to focus in the future as well, is the role of technology and the impact of cross-sectional digitalization in the world of internationalization of higher education institutions as well. So that is something that is happening at the same time. So mobility, international mobility, and online mobility, on-site mobility of students and staff, they should be shaped and they should be reframed together with the analyzing and taking into consideration the impact of technology and the impact of online technologies, but especially as well in the next future as well, the impact of artificial intelligence in the way we make decisions in higher education institutions, and the way students and their families they make decisions in their international scope, for when we are looking for a better chances to study abroad, or where they're looking for to better chances to know what is the situation of future curricula and so forth. So, and to sum up, these are for me the most important three pillars. One, mobility of students, taking into account all forms of the mobility that can be effective currently. The second thing is the mobility and the internationalization of the staff, which I think is something, staff and knowledge, which is something that is absolutely necessary, taking into account as well the benefits and the leverage that technology can produce in our societies and in our higher education institutions. And the third thing is the role, the pillar of technology as a factor that is going to leverage and is going to create new opportunity for higher education institutions in the future, and it's going to take as well new challenges because we have to revisit and we have to maybe revamp and to modify what is our current, let's say, business models or education models, that they should be changed according to the impact of these global trends, according to internationalization, and we have to change them according to the impact of the new technologies. There is a fourth factor. The fourth factor is another important factor. Maybe it's not a pillar, it's something that is coming from the external environment and is going to affect the future of higher education. This fourth factor is related to the role of the nationalistic anti-globalization movements that are taking place here and there, everywhere in the world. So currently the situation in Eastern countries, for example, in some Asian countries as well, and or in the situation in Russia, is affecting very negatively the traditional view of internationalization of higher education, because they are forcing to their institutions there to be more closed, less international, and what is more important, less open to international influences coming above all from the Western world. On the other way around, there are many counter movements as well in the West that they are as well connected to the nationalistic forces and maybe to exclusive nationalistic forces that are preventing higher education institutions to be bold there in the way they conceptualize the future of higher education, and therefore they are as well forcing universities, higher education institutions in some cases to keep much more conservative, let's say, or closed strategies when they try to open themselves to internationalization, because they think that maybe there are some challenges or there are some threats in the environment, and therefore the higher education institution, they should be preserved, or they should be protected against these forces coming from other external factors that can be aggressive. Like, for example, in some cases, some examples, we know that some countries like the UK, they are somehow closing the doors to international students because they think that can be a door to uncontrolled immigration. And that's something that's happening as well in some Nordic countries that are as well going some years back in their policies related to the incorporation of international students in their classrooms, because they think that maybe the situation was out of control because of the according to some decision makers in these countries, the number of international students was growing too much for the international standards they might accept. So these three pillars of mobility of students, mobility of staff and knowledge, and the third one, mobility of, the role of technology, can be accompanied as well by an analysis of the situation of these anti-globalization forces that are taking place in the West and in the East, and in the West for different reasons. In some cases because of anti-globalization philosophies and ideology. In the other way, because some Western institutions, they think, or some Western governments as well, they think that this is a way to protect their societies against the international aggressive force that is taking place in other countries. So this is a combination that is really, strong and powerful, and we should pay a very careful attention to it.
Beautiful. I mean, there was so much in your answers, and we could, all of them very fascinating, so we could go into all of it. But just for the sake of delimiting conversations a little bit more, I would love for us to concentrate a little bit in terms of the admissions process. And the first question I have is, as you know, there are national admission systems, so quite a lot of universities need to comply with the systems, sometimes unwillingly, sometimes willingly. What do you think are the advantages and disadvantages of having this type of a solution versus having more autonomous solutions and giving universities more flexibility in terms of the process of admissions, whom to attract and enroll, and so forth?
Well, again, I appreciate this very much this question because that's one of the hot topics in many countries currently. But it's one of the hot topics, and maybe the most important topics working currently in my country, which is Spain. We have currently carried out a research on what is the situation of the admission system for international students in a group of 20 countries all around the world belonging to the OCDE. And we found that there are, again, differences that are very important. And these differences are shaping the way universities carry out internationalization in their respective countries. But not only that, it's the way they understand as well that international students and therefore future international staff may affect their productive and economic systems internally. So our results that are very they were very recent. Results show that there are 3 blocks of countries, and these 3 blocks of country. Well, the countries we analyze are within the OCDE countries, so mostly they are Western countries located in North America, located in Europe, and located in some parts of in Australia and some parts of Asia as well. Of industrialized Asia. So we found that there are 3 blocks of countries. The first block of countries related to this factor of admission systems is the block in which they have a totally decentralized system for admission. That is to say that the last word of admission of international students is given to the universities themselves, so they can create their admission strategy practically in a way that is very autonomous, in a way that is very independent. So in this case, there are countries like, for example, the United States, countries like Canada, like countries like the UK, in which the restrictions are coming mostly from the point of view of the immigration, not admission of the students, but the immigration to the country, which is a different thing. This is a separate problem that maybe we can talk about it later on. But this kind of decentralized, let's say, flexible systems in which the autonomy for admission is given practically 100% to the universities is confronted to another system in which it is included countries, mostly continental big countries of continental Europe, like, for example, France, for example, Italy, for example, Spain. In these countries, we have a system that is a bit of a mixture in which there is a national centralized admission system normally related to an exam or normally related to a test about a knowledge of or that is they are trying to measure or to assess the overall knowledge a candidate coming from the secondary education may have or should have in order to be admitted in higher education institutions, and therefore in many cases they have a national exam, a national entrance or admission exam. In this situation, there are countries like, for example, France, Italy, or Spain, or Portugal. But at the same time, they included several or quite a few exceptions by which universities can be autonomous, or maybe they can decide at a certain point what kind of students they would like to accept, and especially in degrees that are not subject to a very big social demand internally, like, for example, medicine or health sciences. In these cases, the admission system is very centralized, is very closed. And in this case of health sciences, for example, in Spain or in France or in Italy, the admission system is very restricted for international students because they are restricting a lot the possibilities of entrance of international students, even if they are very good if they are not, or they are not challenged through this national system, admission system in the respective countries. So in France, in Portugal, in Spain, or in Italy, so we have the universities at the center level of autonomy in which they can make decisions about what students they would like to accept, but provided that the degrees the students are intending to get access, they are not, let's say, a big demand sector, or a big demand degree. So in such a cases, the system is very centralized, and normally the barriers to entry to international students are mostly unpenetrable. So that's the situation there. And a specific case is Germany. In Germany, the admission system is very centralized, and therefore all international students, they have to take exam and a prior course as well in order to get access to the national education, higher education system. But what is interesting in Germany as well is that once the students go through this channel, they have many opportunities to get financial support. And another thing that is very important is that normally international higher education for students in Germany is free for international students as well. So they have a big, let's say, barrier of entry, but they have many incentives for the students once they are inside, because they get grants and they get scholarships, and at the same time they have a big support from the state for their higher education institution, from their higher education institution from the states, in order to plan, in order to get support for their future studies. So again, these are the three blocks. Let's say one block is the Anglo-Saxon countries, mostly, in which the opportunities for entry in their current national system is very high. On the other hand, they have let's say a very high tuition fee policy. So maybe the barrier of entry here is not academic, but is mostly economic. So because the tuition fee normally is very high for international students. We have the second group of countries, is the countries that normally they are continental European countries, in which they have a kind of mixed system in which they provide, or they have a big academic barrier of entry in the form of an exam, of a centralized national exam for the students intending to get entrance in the system. And we have, well, finally, the case of Germany, in which they have a very big, strong, maybe, let's say, difficult barrier of entry to get entrance to this system, but at the same time they have a very exhaustive and a very effective system to help students in order to get financial support or get grants and scholarships that can prove very useful in order to keep them in the higher education for a successful way for their future years to come. So yeah, so that's a topic that is very interesting, especially for countries in continental Europe. I think they have to rethink what is the system they are applying to international students, because in many cases they are losing thousands of international students that can be very talented and can be providing value to the local and to the national societies, but at the end they don't come to these countries because they have this kind of very big barrier of entry for them. But at the same time, they have economical conditions and they have social conditions that are supporting the students once they are within, or while they are inside the system. So let's say that these two blocks are confronting each other, because on the one side we have a kind of flexible, adaptable and quick system for admission in some places, but for a big price. And on the other hand, we have low prices, low tuition fees that can be very attractive and appealing to international students, together with a generous supply of grants and financial support, but at the same time with a big barrier of entry that is related to this kind of national centralized exams. So I think many countries in Europe and many countries as well in other places, like for example in Latin America and some places in Asia as well, they have to revisit and they reformulate the international strategy for the admission for international students because this is preventing that national universities to have a higher level of internationalization according to international degree students, and therefore this is affecting as well the situation of the local economies, because if we don't get students now, we won't have taxpayers in the future, and therefore we won't have future labor force that is very effective and very motivated to stay in the country and therefore to produce economic benefit for the countries in the future. So I think that would be a very good investment, a medium to long range investment for this kind of countries, let's say continental European countries, to revisit and to reformulate the strategies to attract international students, because now the barriers of entry for them, they are too high, they are too complicated, and it's preventing the demographic and the economic renovation of these countries, especially in continental Europe. The problems for Anglo-Saxon countries, they are different. The problems for them, the flexible admission system for them is working perfectly, is working very effectively, but they have other barriers of entry that are related to the financial restrictions they have in the form of very high tuition fees and very high costs of living in the respective countries, and this is preventing them maybe. So there is an increasing amount of international students that they might be interested to go to traditional Anglo-Saxon countries in the past, like for example the United States or Australia or Canada or the UK. Now they would like very much to go over to other countries, for example, continental European countries or even Latin American countries or even some countries in Asia. But since they have still a very centralized and sometimes closed system, so it is very difficult for them to finally get involved in these institutions, and therefore that's an opportunity that the economies and these national and local economies in these countries, in these continental European countries, for example, um, well, they will be harmed because they won't have the access to the right skilled labor sources, resources in the future, since we have the opportunity to incorporate in the system good international students coming from abroad.
Again, Professor Bruque, I'm so impressed with both the depth and the breadth of your insights. Thank you so much for sharing this. And indeed, this is an important topic. And for DreamApply, this is a very interesting topic. One of the things that we praise ourselves about is actually the system allows universities to enroll 50% more international students. We can talk about why that is, but essentially there are almost no universities or admissions teams that we speak with that aren't interested in implementing it. Therefore, we are interested in how much space they actually have to carry this out. And like some of the examples you've mentioned in Germany, it seems like there is less limitation on private universities. So one of our partners, SRH Higher Education, they have significantly increased their international applicants, which brings me to my next question. What do you think is the role of technological innovation in terms of internationalizing education? And how can universities that are more prone to leveraging these innovations navigate through these types of limitations? Again, in some cases, quite strict, in some cases, a little bit more flexible.
Yeah, again, yeah, this is a very interesting question because I think your role, like for example, the DreamApply role in the admission system for international universities and from world-wide universities is that we have a framework for admission that is made of three different challenges, or let's say barriers of entry for the respective national systems. The first one is the legal barriers of entry related to this kind of centralized system for centralized testing for international students and so forth. That is some kind of academic legal coming from the internal regulation of the country. The second one is the financial restrictions, that are applicable mostly to students that are intended, that they would like to study in traditional, let's say, international hub, like, for example, the United States or UK or Australia or other countries in which the most important barriers of entry is the economic or the financial requirements the governments, the national governments asked in order for international students to get an approval from the immigration services and in order to pay their bills when they are there, because normally the cost of living is very high and the tuition fee is very high as well. And the third one is the technological procedural barriers of entry. So since companies like yours, cannot do a lot to break or to try to lower the barriers of entry that are related to the national laws, to the national barriers of entry from a point of view, the academic requirements, the national governments are asking to international students, and therefore maybe you can do very much either on the financial restrictions related to the cost of living in particular countries like, for example, Australia or the States or some European countries and so forth, because it's something that is imposed by external sources and by external factors. And we cannot do either very much related to the lowering of the tuition fees, because that's another national and institutional policy that is out of our control. So I think your role is very important in the third group of barriers of entry. This third group of barriers of entry is the technological, let's say, technological / procedural barriers of entry, in which international students that are very motivated and maybe have the resources, they have the academic resources, and in many cases they have as well the financial resources to get involved and to enroll internationally, they cannot cross the barrier because they find, or maybe it's rather complicated to them, because they find that the information, the knowledge that is necessary in order to solve this barrier is dispersed, is not well structured, maybe it's written in other languages, is contradictory according to the sources, and as well, in many cases, the procedure for admission in many international universities is very complicated as well. It's mixed with regional and national platforms for admission that in some cases they don't work as a whole platform, and therefore they have to be using and utilizing these different platforms working at the same moment, that sometimes they are not coherent and they are not cohesive and they are not working properly, they are not working or matching properly together from one to each other point of the procedure they have to go on in order to get access to the international university. So I think the role of companies like yours, they have to be very much focused on this kind of technological barriers or procedure barriers that are related to the complexity, are related to the black box of the admission system, and in many cases taking place in many universities in the world. So you have the opportunity to break this barrier and to introduce clarity and transparency in the procedure international students they have to follow, and in the organization of the knowledge flows and the information flows that are related to the admission procedure. Obviously, you can provide as well a full package of information that is related as well to the legal academic side of barriers of entry and to the financial side of the barriers of entry as well. But in those two boxes, you cannot go any further. You can provide information about the support systems they have and about what are the requirements they have and so forth, and structure this information in a very understandable way. But the most important thing is that you can break this technological procedural barrier that in some cases maybe is preventing many international students to understand the admission system in many international universities, and therefore they are preventing to have final decision, a very positive final decision of admission in some specific countries. And normally in the countries that they don't have a big experience, or they were not leading the international ranking for international admission, like for example in the United States or Australia or the UK. So in many small and medium European countries, in many small and medium Latin American countries, many small and medium countries in Asia as well, or in big countries as well, in not, let's say, traditional Western Anglo-Saxon university systems, you can use and you can try to break or to remove this kind of barrier in a very successful way. And this is the point in which companies like yours have a very solid strength. So I think you have to take advantage of this position and to try to evolve and to try to elaborate feature solutions in order to be even more effective in the future, so that we can attract this kind of flows of international students from traditional Anglo-Saxon big hubs of international education to other places in which they have very high quality of international education, but they couldn't take advantage of international flow of students because they have this third barrier that was very high to cross or very high to solve or to remove. So the great advantages of systems like yours is that you are providing a very effective way to solve or to remove this barrier.
Beautiful. These are very helpful pointers. Thank you so much. And I think it's a matter of perhaps one co-creation. We provide solutions both designed for universities, but so many of the features actually come from universities. So knowing how much time it takes for perhaps a more national centralized system to implement an innovation, it's just so much easier for them to present it to us, and we solve it quickly. So and then they enjoy it. And then the second part, I think, is and again, this is just my personal opinion, but it's a matter of exposure as well, because I think not so many universities imagine just how much you can decrease the time you have to spend on applications, just how much you can make it easy to manage scholarships and rank and all of this. So I think once universities just get a taste of the added efficiency of these types of solutions, then it's just a matter of critical mass. And that's what we're interested in, because we want to explore more the deeper implications of this. Again, as you said, it may be a few technological innovations here and there, but then looking at how much this scales and how this is impacting access to education globally, that's huge. And I think this is what makes our work fascinating. It's quite inspiring. Um, a few
Absolutely, it
more.
is.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so you're right. Basically, I agree with you. And and students and families, they are confronted to innovations in technology here and there. But if you have the way and have the right resources in order to put everything together and to have something that is making sense altogether, and is decreasing the number of resources and the time that decision makers, when they have to take decisions, mostly students and their families, if they have this full range of information and knowledge together in one single source, that is going to ease their lives for a lot.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Um, uh, our time is unfortunately not unlimited, but there are a few more questions that I'd love to hear your insights on. Not a fan of hypotheticals, but imagine you are consulting a university that wants to improve its admissions process in terms of attracting more international students. When it comes to the student enrollment process, what are the three things you would advise universities to pay attention to?
Well, again, I would do this kind of a structural analysis of their admission systems. They have to analyze what is their current situation in the three level of the three barriers of entry. They have to analyze the legal barrier of entry they have. The second, the financial support system they have, and the third one is the technological procedural barrier of entry. Obviously, they cannot do much in the first and the second, but they can provide as well structured information about the situation of the first and the second, the financial restrictions and the academic restrictions for entry. And they have to focus definitely on the third one. In many cases, they have to focus on how difficult for international students is to get access to a platform. So in some cases, is just written or constructed in the national language, or that is very difficult even for national students to get through the platform because it's very complicated with many stages. In many cases, it's not transparent enough. So they should focus on simplifying what I call is a lean structure of the enrollment system, So I have to take out everything that is not adding value to the value chain of the enrollment system in their respective institutions. And they should keep just the stages and just the elements that they are actually providing value to the student when they are trying to get access and they are trying to get enrollment to the international institutions. So they should focus on these technological procedural effects. They have to analyze all the stages and all the parameters they have involved in the admission system, and they have to focus on the activities that are really providing value to the students while they are trying to get involved or to get enrolled in our university itself. So in this stage, it is very important to work together and to kind of co-design the enrollment system together with obviously the academic services at the respective universities, but together with external experts like your company, for example, because they can provide, let's say, overall cohesive and coherent structure for the enrollment system that is not easy sometimes to get access with the resources we have inside the universities, because sometimes we are in our admission system or enrollment system, we are very much focused on the situation we have inside the country or with the situation we have for our local traditional students, and therefore we are missing the perspective for what international students can understand or what international students they can expect from our system of admission. So definitely have to analyze. Secondly, strictly going to the point, and thirdly, focus on the things that are providing value and create this so-called kind of lean enrollment system, which I think is the future of international enrollments and admission systems.
Beautiful. This brings us to the last topic I'd like to explore, which is the future of international education. And before recording, we briefly touched upon AI and digitization. So how do you think the future of international education is going to look like? And especially when it comes to the admissions process, how can educational institutions best prepare to these coming changes?
Well, this is a very interesting point of view, or this is a very interesting question as well. So I think artificial intelligence and the new developments related to technology, they have two main impacts. The first impact is on the decision-making process of students and families. The second impact is on the very design on the enrollment admission system, So firstly, the first impact, as I mentioned, is the decision-making, is how students and their families, they will make the decisions regarding international admissions or regarding what type of international higher education institutions they would like to go and they would like to use. Not only the institution they are looking for, the institution they want to get enrollment, but the type of education as well, because in some cases, maybe international students, they won't, or they will not be looking anymore to, let's say, establish traditional higher education institutions to do a traditional bachelor or to do a traditional master or doctoral or PhD degree, but maybe they are more interested in other learning models, and therefore business models as well for universities that are related maybe to shorter courses, they are related to more focused courses, and therefore they have to make a first decision is what type of model of the learning, of international learning, I would like to follow, because in some cases they are not going to be interested anymore in doing an international degree or international bachelor 3 years, 4 years in an international country, or to do a master 1-2 years, or to do a PhD 3-4 years in an international country, but they would be more, for example, much more interested in short courses that are providing very deep insight of a particular topic, or that are cross-sectional courses that are taking knowledge from different disciplines at the same time. So in this way, they can decide, for example, would I like to go for a bachelor, or would I like to go to a short course like a micro-credential course, for example, that is going to be providing me with a higher added value in a short period of time, So this relationship between the objective to be fulfilled from a learning perspective and the time I need in order to fulfill it is going to be even more than important for students in the future, because the maturity period for the learning process is going to be shortened quite a lot. So first thing is the decision. What type of education I'd like to go when I'm trying to purchase, or when I'm trying to get to international education. The second thing is, well, once I would like to, or I decide to go for a bachelor or for international master or for international master degree, what type of institution I would like to choose. In this decision-making process as well, artificial intelligence or the developments related as well to artificial and to new types of intelligence, it's going to get a much higher importance, because the resources we are and the institutions might have now, they are much more leveraged resources in the future than now, because we can use artificial intelligence in order to provide a multi-channel, multi-effective channel in social networks or in YouTube, in video channels, working at the same time together with information we provide through the websites or from the sites of the university at the same time. So we can create multi-platform system in order to get the students, in order to get closer to the decision-making of the students' process, in which they are deciding for what type of courses they would like to take. So these are the two levels of the implementation of the artificial intelligence. Firstly, in the decision-making process, and secondly, the second stage of implementation of artificial intelligence is in the procedure itself. So in this, it is in the enrollment procedure. So how we can leverage, how we can expand, how we can make the procedure of international enrollment much more intelligent and much more quicker, in order to meet the expectations of the future students in a very effective way. So that's something that has to be analyzed as well by companies by institutions focused on international admissions and international enrollment. And for sure, we're going to have enhanced and very much powerful platforms for admissions in the future than we have them currently.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Professor Bruque. You have shared so many interesting insights, and I know for sure that our audience is going to appreciate it a lot. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we finalize it?
Well, I think we talked about the most important trends, and I think we analyzed the most important factors, the technological factor, the socio-legal factor, and the academic factor that are affecting the enrollment process. So I think we covered most of the key elements in the international admission so far. So I think that we have many challenges in the future, and we have to be ready for them. The three elements, or the three factors, or the three agents in the system. The first one is the universities. The second one is students and families, and the third one the international platforms like yours, in order to provide a very much logical and efficient way of getting admission to an international university.
Thank you, Professor Bruque. It's been a pleasure to speak with you, truly.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
And thank you for listening. This is EdTech and Pancakes. I'm Razmik Sargsyan, and we'll be back with another episode soon. Goodbye.